Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over longest consecutive sequence. So basically this question is giving us an unsorted array of integers and we need to return the length of the longest consecutive sequence. So for example, in this case, the longest consecutive sequence would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Therefore, we return the length 4. And yeah, let's get into some test cases to understand this problem better. Test cases to consider. We can have multiple sequences in the array, but we are only concerned with the longest one, and so in this case it would be 4. Or it could just be a simple one where there's only one sequence, and then you just find the length of that and then return 4. Another thing to pay attention to is we can have negatives and duplicates. For negative values, it's just like a sequence. -1, 0, 1, 2 makes sense. Duplicates, ignore them. We only need to care about things for once. They should give you a hint on what data structure we might need to use. So the first very obvious thing to do here is sort our array, so we can easily identify if the difference between our current index and the one before it is equal to 1 when trying to find consecutive sequences, right? So I'm going to start off my pointer at index 1, and I'll be checking if the previous index, if the number there is 1 less than my current index. And to keep track of this, I'm going to introduce two variables, current sequence, which will always start off at 1, and a max sequence value. So 0 is 1 less than 1, so our current sequence is now 2. And now all I'm going to do is move my pointer and see if the next value falls under this sequence, because 4 is a lot bigger than 1. So now what we have to do is we have to reset our current sequence to 1, update our max sequence value to 2 because that's the current largest subsequence we have. And we are going to start our sequence order all over again. And now I'm going to repeat the same thing for the rest of the array. Oops. So I just check, is 4 1 less than 5? And it is. So I'm going to update my current sequence value to 2. And my max sequence is still 2. And then when I move my pointer again, my current sequence is 3. And now my max sequence is also 3 because I have reached the end of the array. And that's basically the brute force solution. Let's code it out now. All right, so let's code out our brute force solution. So the first thing we're going to do is check if our array length is 0. And if that's the case, then we just want to return 0. Now I want to sort my array to find sequences faster, and I'll have two variables to keep track of my current sequence and to find my maximum sequence in the array. Now I'm ready to iterate through my array, and I actually want to start my iteration at 1 because I want to check if every previous index value has a difference of 1. And before I do that, I'm going to make sure that the previous value is not a duplicate value because I want to ignore duplicates. And this should give you another hint to what data structure we could use to optimize this solution. So once I know that my previous value is not a duplicate, I want to basically see if the difference is 1. And if it is 1, I can increase my current sequence length, and I can also find the max value between my maximum sequence and my current sequence, so they're both updating accordingly. And if this is not the case, if it's not a difference of 1, then all I want to do is reset my current sequence value to 1. So I'm starting over. I'm starting in a new place. And then now I just return my max sequence, and this should run. and looks good. So in my optimized solution, the first thing I'm going to do is put everything into a hash set, just because this is going to make searching for elements and looking up elements all in O of 1 time, which is way better. So I can get rid of this duplicate value here. So I'm working with this set. And the goal in my optimization is to find the start of my sequence. So at each number, I want to check, is there a number that exists before you? For example, the start of this sequence would be 6 because 5 doesn't exist in the array. But 0 would not be in the start of the sequence because -1 exists, and -1 would be the start of the sequence of -1, 0, 1, and 2. So as I loop through the array and I find the start of my sequence, for example, I'm at -1. Now I want to start looking in my set and see, hey, does my set contain the next number from my sequence? And it does, so I add on to it. Does this number contain the next one? And it does, so I add on to it, and etc. until there's nothing else more to add. And then I look for the next start if there is any, and there happens to be one. So I land here and I repeat the same process. And that way I have found 2 sequences with the length 4 and the length 2, and I'll return 4 since this is a greater one. But I was able to do this without having to have while loops, if statements, and edge cases, sorting my array and all of that, whereas I just have a hash set and I'm looping through my nums array once. So let's see how we can code this out. Coding the optimal solution, I'm still going to have an int current sequence and an int max sequence. But this time I'm going to have a hash set. I'm just going to call it set. And the first thing I'm going to do is add all the integers in my nums array to my hash set to make sure that I am avoiding duplicates. And now to the real kind of meat of the problem, which is basically determining the start of my sequence. And I'm going to do this by iterating through my nums array still. And I'm going to say if my set does not contain the number less than my current number, basically I don't want to see a -1 before my 0. If that's not the case, then I've found my current starting point and I can start my current sequence. And while this is the case, I want to continue adding to my sequence by checking if there is a number that exists that's 1 greater than my current starting point. And if this is the case, then I increment my current starter and I also increment my current sequence. And now I just find the max and I return it. This should work. Let's see, why is this? Okay. All set dot contain. Oh. That was my mistake. All of this should be inside the if statement because it's unable to read the integer. Oops. Sorry about that. I'm typing on my iPad. And there we go. that's how you optimize your solution.